In this recording in our series of creating a pocket operation, we'll talk about creating a tool for the toolkit inside the operation itself. Now, what do I have to take into consideration when I'm creating a tool or when I'm choosing a tool? Well, let's take a look at the part for a moment. One, I want to take into consideration corners that I may have. For example, if I click on this corner over here, and I see this radius, this is a 4 millimeter radius. So I should take that into consideration. Also, I also need to know what the entire depth of the part is. This way, I'll also know to make sure that when I set it up, as far as cutting length and also the mount that it has to be outside the holder, how much I should leave it outside the holder. And in this particular case, it's 40 millimeters. Okay, so let's start and go ahead and create our tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do select. Now, it should be noted also, I'm going to go through creating an Endmill for the pocket, but I will not be going in depth into the toolkit, as there's a whole series of recordings specifically for the toolkit. So let's go to select. And what do we see here? Well, we see the following. There's absolutely nothing in my toolkit at the moment for this part, but I do see on the left-hand side different tools that I can possibly use for this type of operation. What I want to use is an Endmill. So I'll just double-click on Endmill, and you'll see that by default, we'll get an Endmill with a 6 millimeter diameter with the lengths that we have over here. Okay. So I'd like to use, for my first Endmill, I'd like to use a 12 millimeter Endmill. So I'll just put in the value of 12 millimeters. Note by default, the shoulder diameter and arbor diameter are automatically put to 12. Obviously, you can change them according to the tools you may have. You'll also note that we have a preview window, which is controlled over here on the top right-hand corner. I can open and close it over here. Now, next, I want to go further down to the cutting length. The cutting length, I'm going to leave that at 24 millimeters, and the shoulder length, I'm going to leave it also at 30 millimeters. You can see also that this is represented over here in the side picture. If I click on cutting length, it'll go back to cutting length over here to shoulder length. The total length of the tool, I'm going to use a total length of my tool of approximately 120 millimeters. And this is where I said outside of the holder. Outside of the holder, I need it to be at least 40 millimeters. So I put this at 40 millimeters. And I can put in also the number of flutes. Say we're going to have an Endmill with 4 flutes on it. Now, as far as the feed rate goes, if I go further down over here, we have feeds and spins. F and S. If I click on that, we can see the feed rates that I'd like to have. And this is actually going to be, from now on, the default for this tool in this project. This is my default feed rate, my default feed rate for finishing, for going down in my Z direction, and for my links, percentages of what values I have over here. We also have the spin rate and spin finish. Note that the spin rate can be given in RPMs or as in V, velocity. I'm going to leave it at RPMs. And also with the feed rate, we can have it at millimeters per minute or feed rate per tooth. I'm just going to have it at the regular feed rate. I can also create a holder. That is done very quickly by just going to Endmill, right click, and we have the option of add adapter and holder. Now, for your typical 2.5D operation, you may not need this all the time, but it's always good to have it. This way you can see it in your simulation. Now, your adapter, if defined already in your VMID, will automatically come in according to that machine. Your holder, you'll note that they will have a list on the side of what holders I want to use. And I want to use an ER32 holder that is approximately 2 inches long. So I'll just double click on this and it'll automatically put the holder over there as well. And you can see this in our tool viewer. I'll just accept that tool, and what we see is the following. We see all that information over here. We also automatically at this point see a preview of what is going to be cut, and you can see it's taking the outside shape of the part. You'll also note that we have on top tool, the data. Now this data is the feed and spin rate that we talked about before, and this is now the default for all other operations that may use this tool. I can change it over here, and it will change only for this particular operation. We have coolant control here, as well as tool change position. I'm just going to leave it exactly where it is. And we also have holder and collision protection, and this is available to us since we did define a holder, and it'll make sure that our clearance of the tool will not go further down than what is listed over here. In our next recording, we'll talk about our levels page.